It was already past midnight when Daniel's car rolled along the cracked, forgotten road. His headlights carved narrow tunnels of light through the thick mist that pressed in on every side. The world outside was nothing but darkness and fog, swallowing the forest, the fences, even the moon. The radio had died miles back, leaving him in a cocoon of silence broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional rattle of gravel under the tires. He checked the map on the passenger seat for the 10th time. A red circle had been drawn around a small town called Blackwood Hollow. He had never heard of it before last week, when the letter arrived. The handwriting was sharp and jagged, signed only with the words, "You must come home." But Daniel had never lived here, had no memory of this place. Still, something about the letter pulled him. Something ancient. The trees grew denser as he drove deeper. Their twisted branches arched overhead, forming shapes that looked disturbingly like grasping arms. Sometimes, he swore he saw shadows dart between the trunks, vanishing the instant his eyes tried to focus. His pulse quickened, but he forced himself to keep driving. He was tired, yes, but not hallucinating. The road ended abruptly at a crooked wooden sign. "Welcome to Blackwood Hollow." The letters were peeling, almost scratched away, and underneath them, someone had scrawled another message in dark paint. "Leave while you can." Daniel stopped the car, his hands tightening on the wheel. For a long moment he considered turning back, but the letter burned in his pocket, an unspoken command. With a deep breath, he pressed forward, crossing the invisible border into the hollow. The town revealed itself in fragments through the fog. Empty houses with broken windows leaned against each other like tired old men. Street lamps flickered with sickly yellow light, buzzing faintly, casting shadows that seemed to stretch too far across the cracked pavement. The air was heavy, damp, carrying a faint metallic taste. He parked near what looked like an abandoned inn. Its roof sagged, its sign hung by one chain, squealing in the wind. Yet one window glowed faintly with light. Heart pounding, Daniel pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior smelled of dust and rot, but the lantern on the counter burned steadily. No one was there. On the wall behind the desk hung a large mirror. Its surface was clouded, streaked with something that looked disturbingly like dried blood. As Daniel approached, his reflection twisted. For a heartbeat, he saw not himself, but a gaunt figure with hollow eyes. Its mouth stretched in a soundless scream. He stumbled back, breath ragged. And when he looked again, only his pale, frightened face stared back. A soft creak echoed above, floorboards groaning. Someone or something was upstairs. Daniel forced himself up the staircase, each step groaning louder under his weight. At the end of the hall stood a door, slightly ajar. From within came faint whispers, impossible to decipher. He pushed the door open. Inside was a small room lit by a single candle. The walls were covered in strange symbols scratched deep into the wood, circling the room in endless spirals. In the center sat an old rocking chair, swaying gently though no one sat in it. Daniel's heart pounded so violently it hurt. He turned to leave only to find the hallway behind him had vanished. In its place was darkness, thick and endless, swallowing the space where the stairs should have been. And then the whispers grew louder. The darkness where the hallway should have been pulsed like a living thing, swallowing sound as well as sight. Daniel staggered back, clutching the frame of the door, his breath shallow and quick. The whispers swelled, not like voices carried on air, but like thoughts pressed directly into his skull. They hissed and murmured, overlapping in a chorus of dread. "You should not have come." The hollow remembers. Blood calls to blood. His fingers trembled as he fumbled for his phone, desperate for light, for proof that the world outside the candlelit room still existed. The screen glowed weakly, casting his face into pale relief. But the device flickered and died instantly. Its battery drained to nothing. Panic surged. The rocking chair creaked, slow and steady, though the air was still. Daniel forced his gaze away from it, unwilling to see what might be occupying it now. His eyes swept over the symbols etched into the walls. At first they were only scratches, random and jagged, but the longer he looked, the more the shapes seemed to shift. Circles within circles, spirals feeding into spirals, forming a pattern that made his stomach churn. A sudden knock echoed through the room, not from the door behind him. There was no longer a door, but from inside the wall itself. The sound traveled, moving behind the symbols, circling him. The candle sputtered. Daniel stumbled backward until he hit the corner. He pressed against the wood, half expecting it to give way, but it held. The whispers grew sharper, their words forming clearer patterns. Find the root, dig beneath, unearth what sleeps. Then the floor buckled. Dust rained from the ceiling as boards groaned and split. The candle toppled, plunging the room into complete blackness. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears as something cold brushed his ankle. He kicked out, hitting only emptier. When he scrambled to his feet, the symbols glowed faintly in the dark, red as fresh wounds. They pulsed, each throb synchronized with his heartbeat. And from the center of the room, where the rocking chair swayed violently now, a shape began to rise. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs bending wrong, its head nearly scraping the ceiling. Its eyes were hollow pits, yet Daniel felt its gaze pierce him. The whispers ceased, replaced by a silence so thick it seemed to press against his chest. The creature leaned forward, its mouth opening wider than humanly possible. Instead of sound, a blast of icy wind erupted from it, carrying with it the stench of earth and decay. Daniel shielded his face, stumbling blindly toward the glowing wall. His hands struck the symbols, and to his shock, the wood gave way like paper. He fell through, tumbling into another space. His body hit damp soil, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. He coughed, scrambling upright. Around him stretched a tunnel carved from dirt and roots, lit by a pale, sourceless glow. The tunnel stretched endlessly, its walls slick with damp soil and entwined with roots that pulsed faintly, as if carrying blood instead of sap. Daniel walked, each step sinking slightly into the soft earth, the air thick with the smell of mold and iron. He kept glancing back, but the sealed wall remained, cutting him off completely from the inner above. The whispers pressed forward with him, deeper, always deeper. The root waits, his pulse hammered, yet he obeyed, powerless to resist. Soon the passage widened into a cavern. Its ceiling was lost in darkness, and from it hung countless roots, dangling like skeletal fingers. At the center of the chamber rose a monstrous root thicker than any tree trunk he had ever seen. It throbbed with a dim, crimson glow, casting sick light across the walls. Daniel approached reluctantly. The closer he came, the louder the whispers grew, until they weren't whispers anymore, but screams in unison. Blood to blood. Wake IT. Wake IT. His knees buckled under the pressure, hands clutching his skull. The root split open, revealing a hollow cavity like a mouth. Within it lay bones, human bones, dozens of them, gnawed and blackened. His stomach lurched, bile burning his throat, but something gleamed among the remains, a small silver locket, pristine despite the rot surrounding it. Against every instinct, Daniel reached for it. The instant his fingers closed around the locket, the cavern trembled. Roots writhed violently, slamming against the walls. Soil poured down in streams. The screams rose to a fever pitch. Daniel staggered back, clutching the locket to his chest. Then the ground split beneath him. He fell, tumbling into darkness. When he came to, he lay in another corridor, this one carved not of soil but of stone. The walls bore the same spirals etched into the room above, glowing faintly. Torches burned with blue flame, though no heat came from them. He opened the locket with trembling hands. Inside was a faded photograph of a woman he didn't recognize. Yet the sight of her face filled him with a strange, aching familiarity. On the opposite side of the locket was a single word. Scratch violently into the metal. Return. A sudden scraping echoed behind him. He turned. From the tunnel's mouth emerged figures, dozens of them. Their skin hung in tatters, their eyes vacant, their mouths slack as if they'd forgotten how to speak. Yet their heads all turned toward him in perfect unison. Daniel backed away, but the figures shuffled forward. Their movements jerky, wrong. He clutched the locket tighter. The whispers returned, more urgent than ever. The root is bound. You must unbind it. Blood to blood, the dead surged forward. Daniel ran, the blue torches flickering wildly as the air filled with the sound of dragging feet and hollow moans. The spirals on the walls spun faster, glowing brighter, as if urging him deeper into the maze. Daniel sprinted through the torchlit corridors, the dead staggering behind him in relentless pursuit. Their moans reverberated through the stone, mingling with the whispers clawing at his thoughts. His lungs burned, legs aching. Yet he pushed forward, clutching the locket like a talisman. The passage opened into another chamber. At its center stood a pedestal carved from black stone, its surface etched with spirals that pulsed in rhythm with the locket in his hand. Upon the pedestal rested a book, bound in leather so worn it looked older than the town above. He approached cautiously, aware of the horde closing in. The moment his fingers touched the book, the undead halted. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. Daniel opened it, and words burned across the pages in fresh, bleeding script. The Keeper guards the root. To free yourself, you must face him. Blood calls to blood. The Hollow remembers. The air grew colder. From the far end of the chamber, a figure emerged, and like the shambling dead, this one moved with deliberate purpose. He was cloaked in tattered robes, his face hidden beneath a mask of bone. In one hand he held a staff made of twisted root, its tip glowing faintly with the same crimson light as the great root Daniel had seen before. The whispers shrieked in Daniel's mind. The Keeper, the Keeper, the Keeper. The robed figure raised his staff, and the ground split. Roots erupted, lashing toward Daniel like living whips. He dove aside, the book clutched to his chest, narrowly avoiding the strike. His heart thundered. This was no mindless corpse, this was something far worse. Daniel staggered to his feet, searching for a weapon. The chamber offered none, only the book, the locket, and his will to survive. He shouted over the roar of the roots, demanding answers. Why me? Why bring me here? The Keeper's voice was a rasp of earth and stone. Because you carry the blood. Because you are bound to the Hollow. Because it will never let you go. The words struck like ice. He didn't understand, but the truth of them reverberated in his bones. The locket grew hot in his palm, searing his skin. He opened it again, staring at the woman's face. Her eyes seemed to flicker, alive for a heartbeat, pleading. The Keeper raised his staff once more, roots tearing through the floor. Daniel acted on instinct, pressing the locket to the book. Light burst forth, blinding, filling the chamber with a deafening roar. When the glow faded, Daniel stood alone. The Keeper was gone. The dead had vanished. The book lay in ashes at his feet, its words burned away. But the whispers had not stopped. They had only changed. Now they spoke with a single voice, low and powerful, echoing through every corner of his mind. You cannot escape. The root is awake. The Hollow remembers. The silence after the Keeper vanished was unbearable. Daniel stood frozen, staring at the locket glowing faintly in his trembling hand. The air pressed heavier with each breath, as if the Hollow itself were leaning closer, waiting. Then the ground quaked. Dust fell from the ceiling. Torches flickered violently, and the spirals carved into the walls ignited with crimson fire. The chamber stretched unnaturally, twisting as though it were alive. Daniel stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to run. The stone floor cracked open, roots tearing upward like snakes. From the fissures poured a black liquid, thick and reeking of rot. It slithered across the floor, curling around his feet, retreating only when it touched the glow of the locket. The whispers returned. But now they weren't whispers. They were chants, endless and unified. The root awakens, the hollow rises. Blood to blood, from the largest fissure, something began to emerge. At first it was only a mass of roots and soil, twisting and nodding. But as Daniel watched in horror, the shape took form, a colossal figure, its body made of earth and wood, its face a hollow void. It towered above him, scraping the cavern ceiling. Its eyes opened to pits of burning red. The locket pulsed violently, nearly burning his skin. He realized with dawning terror that it was a key, a link binding him to this monstrosity. His blood, his lineage, whatever tied him to Blackwood Hollow, had woken it. The creature's roar shook the earth. Roots lashed out, tearing through the stone, smashing pillars, breaking reality itself. Daniel ran, leaping over fissures and ducking as chunks of ceiling collapsed. The chamber was disintegrating, turning into a storm of roots and rubble. He tripped, falling hard. The locket slipped from his grasp, skittering across the floor. Roots surged toward it instantly, recoiling in pain when they touched it. Daniel scrambled, diving for the locket, clutching it tight once more. The chants grew deafening, his vision blurred. For a moment, he saw the woman from the photograph standing in front of him, a hand reaching out. She mouthed a single word: destroy. He understood. The locket wasn't just a key. It was also a weapon, summoning every ounce of strength. Daniel raised it high. Light burst forth, blinding white, tearing through the cavern. The monstrous figure shrieked, roots burning to ash. The ground split wider, revealing a void beneath, endless and hungry. The creature staggered, dragged downward by its own unraveling form. Daniel felt himself pulled to, the locket chaining him to the monster's fate. He dug his fingers into the cracking stone, screaming as the abyss yawned wider. At the last second, the woman's voice filled his mind. Choose, save yourself, or save the hollow. The locket seared his palm, demanding his answer. The abyss pulled at him, roaring with the voice of the hollow itself. Daniel clung to the crumbling edge, the locket blazing in his grip. The monstrous figure was almost gone, dragged screaming into the void by unraveling roots. But its burning eyes locked on him until the last instant. Choose, the word thundered through his skull. Save yourself, or save the hollow. Daniel's fingers bled as he struggled to hold on. Visions flooded his mind. The town above, Blackwood Hollow suffocating under its curse. The inn, the mirror, the endless whispers. The woman in the photograph, her eyes pleading. Was she family, a ghost, or something bound to him forever? The locket seared hotter. If he cast it into the void, perhaps the hollow would fall with the beast. But would he fall too? The abyss yawned wider, promising nothing but darkness. Summoning his last strength, Daniel made his choice. He hurled the locket into the void. The explosion of light was instantaneous. The cavern shattered, roots shriveling, screams tearing the air. The abyss collapsed on itself, pulling the beast and the locket into eternal darkness. Daniel was thrown upward by the force, catapulted through collapsing tunnels, through stone and soil, until he was expelled violently into the night. He landed on the cracked street of Blackwood Hollow. The fog was gone. The town lay silent, bathed in pale moonlight. The houses stood still, lifeless, their windows empty. For the first time, the whispers had ceased. Daniel lay trembling, staring at the sky. He had done it. He had destroyed the root, freed himself, freed the hollow, or so he thought. From the corner of his eye, he saw movement. In the window of the inn, a lantern flickered to life. The mirror inside glowed faintly red, and just audible on the night air came a whisper-only one, but louder than ever before. The hollow remembers. Daniel staggered to his feet, his heart sinking. He turned to leave, to escape down the broken road. But the sign at the edge of town had changed. No longer did it say "Welcome to Blackwood Hollow." Now it bore a single word, carved deep, fresh and raw: return. Daniel's scream echoed into the night, swallowed by the endless dark.
you.